Welcome to today's episode of the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. Today we're talking proactive leadership. This is a subject I'm highly passionate about. And if you attended A New Coffee Industry event, you will have seen my presentation that was all about leading yourself and others in uncertain times. And at the core of what we talk about when it comes to leadership at Mapper Forward is transitioning, changing, finding flow in proactive leadership. Previously, in a recent episode of the podcast, we talked about the low barrier to entry. One of the consequences of our industry having a low barrier to entry is that because we're learning on the fly, we are constantly reacting to situations that are happening and we're trying to fix them. And that leads to a reactionary leadership style. And so because we're constantly reactive to situations that are happening, we're never really setting the tone or the flow or the pulse of anything really. We're not determining through proactive leadership the direction that we want things to happen. We're just waiting for things to happen around us, and we take action based on what our environment is requiring of us. And in all the mastermind group coaching and the one-on-one consulting that I do in the coffee industry, the core of what we are transitioning everybody into is this concept of how do I become a proactive leader? Now, there's a substantial amount of work that's required to do in order to become a proactive leader. A lot of it is steeped in this idea of elevating your barrier to entry that you're requiring of yourself. And at the core of that is education. So how do you get educated in understanding the things that are required for you to be somebody who can make decisions about what's coming, not what's happening right now? Let's use the pandemic as an example to talk about the pros and cons of reactive leaders versus the pros and cons of proactive leaders. So, reactive leaders, and there are pros and cons to both of them. What are the pros of being a reactive leader? Well, being a reactive leader helps you think on your feet quickly and respond very quickly and become adaptive to situations. And it's a wonderful skill to have. And I'm of the firm belief that the best proactive leaders are forged from people who were once reactive leaders. I was previously a reactive leader, and that's because I, like everybody else, kind of learned how to be an entrepreneur on the job. I didn't know how to innovate before this, and with Elixir Specialty Coffee, I became somebody who had to learn on the go. There was nobody in the world that had done what I had decided to do and am doing. And so becoming a reactionary person to my environment was how I entered the space. And I did the same thing in my music career, which is another industry that's filled with reactionary people because of the low barrier to entry again. So that's one of the pros of being a reactionary leader. What is one of the cons of being a reactionary leader? Well, you're never setting the pace of the direction that you flow into. You can never plan ahead because you're constantly knocked off that pedal by what's happening right now. Now let's look at the pros and cons of being a proactive leader. Well, the pro of being a proactive leader is that you are in control. You set the tone of what happens. And with that comes a whole bunch of really great things, like peace of mind, like calm. They're sort of the same thing, but in different ways. There's a confidence that comes with being a proactive leader. But what are the cons of that? The cons of being a proactive leader are that you have to miss opportunities if you don't have the skills of what it was to be a reactionary leader. So you may have to say no to a number of things that are happening right now, because if you say yes to them, they sacrifice the success of the things that you have coming. It's not always the case, but a lot of the time it is. Another con of being a proactive leader is simply that your long-term vision can sometimes prevent you from and some people will see this as a con, some people will see this as a pro, most people will see this as a con. It will prevent you from the things that have instant gratification. Now, I'm a girl who likes to play the long game. I like the delayed gratification because the delayed gratification usually are the goals worth going for. They're the adventures that reap the greatest rewards. Reactionary leaders go for instant gratifications. Proactive leaders go for the long-term gratification. And so that doesn't mean that you can't be a mostly proactive leader that's got the skills in being a reactive leader. But again, if we look at the pandemic, it's the proactive leaders that have fared the best in these kinds of situations. And they will continue to fare the best as we evolve out of the pandemic. Why? Okay. Proactive leaders saw the pandemic coming in January and February. Proactive leaders are all about having an ear to the ground and assessing the quality of data and information that they are receiving all the time. Reactive leaders wait till something happens to take action. And at that time is usually too late because everybody else is doing the same thing. So the proactive leaders, and I've used this analogy that I'm about to use at the beginning of the pandemic. It's the analogy of a dragon coming and burning down a town. And there were some people that were standing on the cliff, and in the distance, they saw a dragon coming. And they registered that there was a dragon coming, processed the information that a dragon was coming, and realized what happens when a dragon shows up. And they sorted themselves out and went to warn other people, hey, there's a dragon coming. And most people said one version of, there's not a dragon coming. There are no dragons. They exist in movies and myths and books. There's no dragon coming. And the person said, well, come onto the cliff. I can show you the dragon. And people said, I don't have time. It's not going to be a big deal. It's not there. And some people did go to the cliff and took a look. And some of those people could see the dragon coming, and others just said, it's not going to come this direction. How do you know it's even going to land here? I'm not going to stress myself out over something that may never happen. Proactive leaders do not do that. Proactive leaders do not sit here and say, I'm not going to stress myself out over something that might not happen. What they do is they assess the likelihood and probability of whether that dragon's going to show up. And if they assess that the risk is better than probable, or at least probable, they prepare. And if it doesn't show up, they see the value in having gone through the process and preparing their teams for the fact that a dragon may show up. And then if it does out of nowhere, they are prepared for it anyway. But then what happened was the dragon got closer and closer and closer. And proactive leaders still trying to convince other people that they need to get prepared, because if we're all prepared for this, it's better for the whole community. Realized that I can't help any more people. This dragon is now close enough that people can make their minds up for themselves. I've got to go take care of this. Now the dragon showing up is imminent, and I've got about, 3 hours before the dragon shows up, and it's going to take me 2 hours to get ready. And so they went about their business of making sure that their staff was safe, that everyone was out of their house. Again, in the analogy, everyone in the house was out of the house because the house was built of wood, and if the dragon shows up and burns the house down, everything's going to go. Reactionary leaders were in awe of the fact that, hey, there is a dragon. I wonder if it's going to show up, and if it does show up, how it's going to affect me. And in their awe of seeing the dragon, still didn't take action. Proactive leaders took action and prepared for what comes after their house was burnt down by the dragon. The dragon showed up on the cliff and it landed right there where everybody was. And in one foul swoop in March, it breathed fire across the whole village that was built out of wood. By that time, proactive leaders were already taking action for what comes next. They had already gone and hidden in the hills, or got away from the fire, or prepared the water to put out the fires. And they had an action plan. While reactionary leaders were freaking out and looking up at the dragon in shock, saying, oh my God, the dragon showed up. What do I do now? Fast forward a couple of months and we're in August. And we've started to realize that this isn't just one dragon. This dragon has a family. And they're going to keep showing up. And we don't know how long the dragons are going to show up. We don't know if we can figure out how to integrate them into our society. We don't know if they're going to get bored and just go away. We don't know anything. And the information that we're being told by our governments is okay to say at best, it's okay. If we look at it objectively, it's bad. The data is not something we can rely on. And so what do? Well, what we do is we take this moment and we start looking at, am I a reactionary leader? Whether I'm leading myself or others, because everything we've spoken about relates to us as individuals and professionals, as well as employers and business owners. So how do I take this information, process and assess how much of me is a reactionary leader and how much of me is a proactive leader? And how do I transition that so that I'm setting a tone and a flow for my career in coffee and my business in coffee and in life so that I am proactively determining the direction that things go in. And if you can master that, that's a life skill that will serve you exponentially and serve the people around you. The flow-on effect for proactive leaders is that the people around them, their staff, their business partners, their families, their friends, they see the vibration, to use a woo-woo word that I don't know how to replace with something that's more scientific than that, but they see the vibration of that person. They see that they are not freaking out about things. They see that, yes, they get concerned, but they do not freak out. They assess and they take action. They're able to calculate based on data and information that has as best the quality that they can find, and they take action. And if you need help doing this, join one of our mastermind groups. It is at the core of what we focus on. How do we transition you from becoming a reactionary person who's leading themselves or others in the coffee industry to proactive leadership? I hope this has been really helpful. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Have an amazing rest of your day.